Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, two very special guests. Of course, part of the new Wrestle Quest game, tag team with Destiny, Zach and James. Guys, welcome to the two-man power trip. How you guys doing?
Good, man.
I thought you were going to introduce us as a tag team, and I'm like, how did John know we're the Silk Express?
Where did that name come from? That's a cool name. I like that.
You know, so
James has an affinity for silk robes that carried over into his wrestling life.
Zach has
Nice.
an affinity for milk. It's actually why we're called Mega Cat. So we
Yeah.
thought silk and milk, strong synergies, good rhyming, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we
Mega
were,
Cat. Perfect.
what actually happened was we were looking for like some quick ways to kind of wrestlefy ourselves for a trade show right after COVID started lifting and trade shows were returning. And we kind of got started with the plan late. So we got some wrestling boots. We couldn't figure out what else we could get off the shelf rapidly. So we got some silk robes and shades. And it was enough
Nice.
at the WrestleQuest booth to kind of tell the wrestling story. But it's like it's definitely on my bucket list to actually wrestle Zach at some point. At some
Oh
point in
boy,
the next 2 months, we'll get it done.
it'd be a good match.
Hey, silk robes is kind of a little bit like the Nature Boy Ric Flair a little
That's
bit.
it.
So, I mean, it's
Oh, yeah.
not bad. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Long history of robes in wrestling, big time.
Oh, yeah. Where'd you get the boots from?
So those specific boots, I can't remember the name of the store, but it was a wrestler's wife. I'm trying to think of whose wife it was, but it was somebody we had met through the WrestleQuest journey that did some custom gear and swag and asked her for a referral, and she gave me a great boot resource. So I will tell you, we wore them out. It didn't last as long as we hoped, and I probably wore them more than you should.
Yeah.
How was it received? Was it received well?
I think wrestling boots are evergreen. I don't know how it could have not been received well. I think
Yeah.
the whole thing at the end was I didn't want to disgrace wrestling boots by letting them be as destroyed as they were from whatever happens at trade show booths.
Yes. So tell us, I guess we'll start with James and we'll go to Zach, but tell us about WrestleQuest. What's going on? What's coming up? I know that the Gorilla Collective, you guys had a big announcement.
So I feel like every month there's another trade show, another piece. But for those uninitiated, WrestleQuest is the world's first wrestling JRPG. It's a storytelling driven, like coming of age story for an independent journeyman muchacho man who's inspired by 80s wrestling and wants to follow in the footsteps of his heroes. So we've been working on it for a few years now. It's a big game, 40 plus hours of content in the critical path. And we're coming up to launch on August 8th. We have 30 licensed legends. Jeff Jarrett, Andre the Giant, Road Warriors, Jake the Snake, JYD, Sergeant Slaughter. So lots of great flagship, highly memorable wrestlers that kind of raised us when we were kind of on the come up.
Zach, what is your takeaway here from WrestleQuest, which is slowly but surely coming out?
Sure. Beyond what James has already mentioned, I think it's important to say that whether you're a wrestling fan or a JRPG fan, there's something here for you. If you've never played a wrestling game before, this is a great one to kind of get you into it, because we're quite aware that there's probably many RPG players that haven't. And this kind of introduces you to the lingo and the world. And if you're a wrestling fan that's never played a JRPG, I think this is right up your alley because it explores all the storytelling in wrestling that isn't really touched on in most wrestling games up to this point.
Yeah, definitely not. It's one of those things where they should explore some more storylines, which is what people kind of gravitate towards, I
Yeah.
think, most of the time, for sure. Now, James, you were kind of saying before, you like wrestling, or you're playing wrestler. Or have you always been a wrestling fan?
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't have a single memory of being James. It doesn't involve me loving wrestling. It's like even after I stopped watching wrestling, I think a lot of Laps fans experience this. Like you're kind of always a wrestling fan, right? Like you might be really busy being a dad or building a career as a professional, but I just I grew up just loving it in the golden era, and I have so many fond memories of it. It's almost I have more wrestling memories than anything else probably.
When did you start becoming a fan?
So I don't have a single memory of me not being a wrestling fan. I remember holidays where I'd get a new wrestling action figure, then I'd sit down and watch wrestling with my dad, and I'd be trying
Mid
to act
'80s?
out. So for me, like I was born in '85, So my earliest wrestling memory frames are probably like late 80s, early 90s. I remember getting like some LJNs and like sitting there on Easter with like that action figure and just being exhausted trying to keep my eyes open to watch like a 9 p.m. show and trying to hope that Ric Flair comes out so I can use my Ric Flair action figure the way he's intended, right? So it's like is a lot of fun too because wrestlers they're like superheroes but they're real, and you never really see Batman, like he doesn't like appear at an arena near you. So here in Pittsburgh, which was at that time the Civic Arena, it was just like enthralling for me to go see wrestling event when it was in town and see, even if it's from the peanut gallery, hear the Hulk Hogan entrance theme song and watch this like larger than life character come out. So it's it's definitely very fond part of my life. And being from Pittsburgh, we're a sports city here with Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, and the big joke in our family used to be that like my dad made our house a wrestling house rather than like a Steelers house, which is always like intended to be a rib, but now it's something I get to be proud of with WrestleQuest.
I love that he's making it a wrestling house, and you're a big wrestling fan. Because funny, my boss was like, "Well, why not Superman, or why
Right.
wrestling? Why Hulk Hogan?" I'm like, "It's a real life superhero. It's not a cartoon. It's not whatever. It's real
right.
life superhero."
Well,
That's why I
Superman isn't
love.
sweaty enough.
It's all that flying cools him down.
Zach, what about you as far as your wrestling fandom?
So I grew up around it. Like it was all, guys in high school watching it and things like that. I was never really, a huge fan, but I was aware of it until we started making WrestleQuest, and it became this sort of crash course deep dive where you're writing these stories and trying to get into, the tone of how Macho Man cuts a promo. So then you watch, 10 promos in an hour and you're like, oh my God. And then that's just stuck with you. So I honestly fell in love with it through making WrestleQuest. My background is in English literature, and seeing how story driven, narrative driven, and character driven wrestling is, it's really this like why wasn't I into this sooner? Essentially, like everything that goes into it, not just the matches that take place in the ring, but all the stuff that happens behind the scenes. Like all of that is part of the drama and the spectacle, and it's a really unique art form. It's like Shakespeare with suplexes. Like it's unbelievable. So I'm very happy to have made WrestleQuest and become a fan through that.
Are you still doing some tape study? Are you watching a lot of stuff
Oh,
still?
well,
Or
yeah, I mean that's better than coffee. Watching a Macho Man promo, it charges your batteries.
who are you gravitating to outside of Macho Man? Who are you like enjoying
So
watching?
I love Macho Man obviously because I think he's just so dynamic. The way his tonality, the ups and downs, gets quiet, gets loud. Besides him, I think Jake the Snake cuts great promos because he's usually a little bit more reserved. A lot of the guys from that era are just like over the top and um, grandiose verbiage and everything. Whereas Jake, he's more subtle, more sinister, quieter. You got to kind of like lean forward and listen a little bit, and that fits his gimmick, his personality perfectly. So that in itself, again, is another reason why wrestling is so interesting. Just this difference in delivery and the difference in how these wrestlers present themselves.
I was just talking to Jake recently, did an interview with him, and I was like, man, sometimes, especially when he was a bad guy, heel, his promos like would scare the crap out of you.
Oh yeah,
but he wasn't doing the "I'm gonna kill you,"
right?
Yelling. It was like very like devious. Like you could trust me. I'm like, I don't know if you could trust this guy. Like that. It's kind of creepy. And he's
Yeah.
like really kind of whispering, like, trust me. It's like I don't know about this. This guy is freaking me out. But he went the exact opposite of everybody else, and I think that's why he's so memorable.
Definitely, yeah, definitely a memorable heel.
Now, James, I know you obviously are a big time fan, much more so. I don't know. I guess, like you said, the golden era. But did you continue on watching today? Like, do you still watch and enjoy wrestling today?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've like come back 20x. I never stopped loving wrestling. I'd say I stopped following everything closely. I'd watch like flagship pay-per-views and things like that. And I've loved watching AEW like on the come up. It's been a big fan of Kenny Omega and MJF and of course Jeff Jarrett. But it's just like it's just so much fun to participate in it in some capacity. I was in high school during the Attitude Era, which is probably like the best ever era for Attitude. Like I'd imagine like as my testosterone was going through the roof, watching Attitude Era wrestling, which is exactly what my mind needed, right? Like I watched it all through high school, college. Probably went more casual audience for the next 10 years or so, and then when we finally committed to WrestleQuest, obviously I wanted to keep up with AW too as a fan, seeing like a new entry and some new love. So we've probably been as a team to a handful of AW events just in the last 2 years, because I've also had the pleasure of introducing many people to wrestling during WrestleQuest, not just team members here, but Zach and I've had many conversations about some of our favorite moments during WrestleQuest development has been actually introducing wrestling to some of the gaming industry press and folks that we're acquainted with, because you can be a true RPG like nerd narrative fan and still find a home in WrestleQuest without any wrestling knowledge. And if you're a wrestling super fan and you've never played an RPG, like this could be your first. I think that's pretty exciting too. I remember having that moment with Super Mario RPG whenever I was in like high school era too.
Very cool, like to do that as far as like making somebody a fan. Because man, I remember back in the day, my buddy's very familiar with some of the wrestling stuff, but during the Attitude Era, I really got him into it, and he was obsessed. Like he hated Vince McMahon, but he loved Steve Austin. The beer things, flipping people off. That's the suck it. But it felt like then all of a sudden it's like everybody was watching it, which was great.
Yeah, I'll probably always consider the golden era like the most nostalgic and the most memorable for me. But I had so much fun being a wrestling fan in the Attitude Era. Part of it is just like I have to imagine that was the right audience at the right age. Like being high school, college during Attitude is just like the best. Like I have to imagine there's some casual dads that were like, this really isn't doing it for me anymore, right? But it was just it's probably I was probably exactly the right age to kind of grow with the WWE in that time.
Those were the days. It was very fun. A lot of debauchery, I guess you could say, during those days for us anyway.
Honestly, reminds me of Zach, to be honest.
Zach, as far as like looking at wrestling, and I'm just looking at the names associated with WrestleQuest. Obviously you mentioned Macho Man, Jeff Jarrett. How do you actually go out and get the names? Like, is there some sort of magic to it? Is there something else? Like, and who do you like? And also, how do you decide what names to go after?
So we definitely had, a wish list, and a lot of these guys are from that classic era that that we grew up with more or less. And then it's really the magic of finding them, and as far as like having them become a part of the game. I think the way that they are represented in WrestleQuest did a lot in our favor. In the game, these legends are literally put on a pedestal. They're these like Statue of Liberty style statues that is like a shrine to them and their contributions to the sport. There's like these areas dedicated to them, and it's really, at the end of the day, we're wrestling fans first, and that's how we approach these legends, by showing our fandom, by again putting them on this pedestal and celebrating what they've done and their legacy.
So basically, there's like a list of like, hey, we got to get Macho Man, Andre the Giant. Like that's
yeah.
kind of,
We start with the list, and then based on who's available, because there's a lot of layers and layers of complexities on who's able to be in it, who has control over their likeness and things like that.
When you look at some of the guys you were able to get, was anybody like you were surprised? Like, wow, I never thought he'd be a part of the game, but now he's a part of the game. Like maybe even Jarrett, because obviously he's WWE and he's not WWE. It's like certain things can change within an instant in the business.
I think everyone that we did manage to make a part of WrestleQuest was both a surprise and a delight in some way or another. But yeah, definitely there's some had more hurdles than others.
Go through the names of all the legends, like all of them, not just obviously Macho and Andre, but can you give us the whole list?
Is there anyone that we haven't mentioned yet? I think it's pretty much out there. So we got Macho Man, Andre the Giant, the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, Sergeant Slaughter, Junkyard Dog, Rocky Johnson, Coco Beware, Luna Vachon, Jake the Snake, Sergeant Slaughter, British Bulldog, L.A. Park.
It's a pretty damn good list.
Yeah, there's more.
DDP, Nasty
DDP,
Boys,
Nasty Boys, Jeff Jarrett,
Warlord,
Warlord, Captain Lou,
Bruiser Brody.
Bruiser Brody, King Kong Bundy.
Pretty awesome list.
Yeah.
My God, James, you must be salivating at that list. Those are all old school awesome guys.
I'm completely dehydrated from the list. It's been a long salivation, sir.
James, when you look at that list, who's like some of your favorites? Just like when you look at like I had to get this, he had to be part of the game. Like this is all, like unbelievable.
I mean, we made our original wish list, and it was Macho, Andre, Road Warriors. Like it just you think about how you can bring them to life in a video game in a way they've never been brought to life before. It's Andre picks the ring up and breaks it in half, right? Like it's like we can take liberties that are unique to WrestleQuest that have never been done because Andre is a real life giant, but not in the way he is in WrestleQuest. And as an example, if you're familiar with the arcade game Snake, like on your phone, or so we have Jake the Snake, and that's something the world had to have, and Zach brought that to life. So, it's been a lot of fun because we get to work with these amazing legends and give them this new extension of their legacy. And it's a mix of autobiographical and fantastical that we're just bringing to the world. Like it's always inferred that Andre's actually a giant, but why not explore that in our game? So it's always been WrestleQuest has always been like a fan first thing. Like we made WrestleQuest because we just wanted fans to have it, and we just loved it. It's like the two of our favorite things living together in harmony, and the amount of time and hours and gallons of baby oil that have been part of the development are exceptional for sure. So if anyone has ever made a game or not, it's like it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. It's like having massive house construction, but having people criticize every single piece and corner of it. So it's just really like a major effort. But it's probably 40 people full time for a couple years, just like living in it. And you can't really make things that are fun and creative unless you love them. So we've been pretty lucky that like the team working on it are also just massive fans of that genre of games and that world in wrestling. So and we're also say we're method developers, John, right? So we try to really become like immersed in that space. So Zach's been power bombing his children to bed and cutting promos at work, and it's been really
breaking
a big
chairs,
challenge.
throwing people through tables.
He's been a real problem for a long time now. So I'm glad we're finally talking about it on air. But
man, I wish I could be like that at work and just like go crazy like that. That's awesome. It's like, yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna powerbomb this guy because that's what it would happen in the game. That's yeah.
I've seen Zach start and end many meetings in unconventional ways.
That'd be great. Zach,
up, chair budget is also up. Yeah.
Choke slam some guy and be like, "What the hell was that about?" Hey, man, I'm just practicing the game,
figuring out life plans. Yeah.
Yeah. So Zach, with Muchacho Man, like, how does that actually get birthed? Like, who thinks of it? Like, whose idea is that? What about like the gimmick, if you will, of the main character?
So within the game world, he starts out as Randy Santos, and like us, he grew up watching wrestling. One of the first scenes in the game is him glued to a CRT watching these guys, and he's in his backyard ring, like practicing some moves and whatnot. So he's definitely like a pure fan. And as he grows up, he enters the pro wrestling world. He's like, in a training gym in the beginning and everything. And his whole shtick is that he's in constant kayfabe. For him, wrestling is complete real. He has this very sort of like childlike, innocent relationship with it that he can't be disabused of. And he's inspired by Macho Man, to enter the world and become a champion. So his story is sort of about how does he achieve that? How does he make that happen without losing that purity, that pure relationship he has with the sport?
James, when you look at that gimmick, obviously Macho Man, very, very similar. Do you love how like that gimmick kind of comes to life and how it's set up throughout the game? I mean, you're the fan. I mean, you're the diehard. Do you absolutely love that maturation process?
If I'm the fan, then WrestleQuest is going to be a big success because I love it. It's the most fun I've ever had playing a game, and I purchased a ton of sunglasses the past year because of this game. So it's definitely it's definitely been like so much fun watching it come to life. And Muchacho Man actually plays the role of like the inspired fan. Like he's a journeyman that literally joins the industry because of his deep love and appreciation for wrestling, and he goes through each level of what you would expect with working through the indie scene and driving gig to gig everywhere and working his way up at the gym. And he starts off as like a basically like a preteen backyard wrestling, like a lot of us did, right? So it's intended to be this nostalgia bomb that's relatable and immersive, because that's like the story we're telling. And I think a massive number of wrestling fans can relate to it, even if they've never been a wrestler. Everyone has a little bit of an idea of what goes into it, so we try to explore it in a way that's a little more accessible and has like a lot of like fun liberties because of the toys and the fantasy.
Have you played a lot of old school wrestling video games in the past?
Come on, John.
You
Of
better
course
have.
I played.
You
Yeah.
better have. Okay. Which one was your favorite then?
Well, for me, I'm gonna say it was probably Super WrestleMania, but WrestleFest is right beyond that. We do have all the arcades upstairs at the office, and
Oh, that's awesome.
it's like, I mean, it's definitely just so much an unnecessary amount of my childhood was spent playing those games. I had a couple brothers too, so it's always fun to kind of beat the crud of one another. And for some reason, I remember in that era that was the beginning of like ESRB and blood and games and a lot of that oversight. And for some reason, there was a lot of watchdogging over fighting games for parents, but a little less so for wrestling at first. And then immediately following that, particularly with things like the Attitude Era, that changed, of course. But there was definitely, I mean, who doesn't spend time that had siblings like stone cold stunning their family? Like it's like it's like some of the most fun you can have. It's very wholesome, and I wish there was someone here I could just take down right now. But those games were just like part of every every console generation too. Like I remember playing wrestling games on the Nintendo, Super Nintendo. I remember playing DOS games on my PC, and just any new piece of technology, like how can I wrestle on it?
Nintendo 64, PlayStation, so on. Yeah,
No
it's like
doubt.
every time you grow up, the game just grows up with you.
How about you, man? What's your favorite wrestling game? What's the one that stands out the most?
I don't know. There was always like WrestleFest was always awesome. I liked No Mercy, WCW versus the World. There's a bunch of them
I
that,
love
that
that
are
one,
really
man.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time wrecking people's Rey Mysterio and WCW versus the World. That was like in that era, that was the one on 64. I know people just go crazy for like Mayhem and but it's I just love WCW and WO. I remember some of the promos. Like for whatever reason, it really stuck with me when Eddie Guerrero would tell people if they want to get froggy, and I was like, "What is getting froggy?" Like I'll never forget that. Like I asked people to get froggy all the time that year. No one knew what it was. They were just into it, right? It's exciting coming from those guys.
Love it when wrestling becomes like pop culture. You know what I mean? When you start using the catchphrases, too sweet and for life and everything. I
That's
love
right.
that.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. Zach actually oftentimes introduced himself into rooms like that. He's always just dropping
Really?
catchphrases, cutting promos. Like
Yeah.
he can't keep it together. It's too much energy. It's like real life electricity.
Zach, were you familiar with the wrestling games? I know you weren't maybe a big fan back then, but were you familiar with the wrestling games? Did you play any wrestling games?
So I'm more the RPG end of things. If
Okay.
James is bringing the wrestling game magic, then I'm definitely the other side of the coin. With I played RPGs from NES up to Super Nintendo and beyond. That was a big part of my video game heritage, if you will.
What's some of your favorites?
So on NES, the original Dragon Warrior, Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar, and then 16-bit era, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, of course. I was a kid when Final Fantasy VII came out, like the original one. I know it's just re-released in the last handful of years, but I was there for that big PS1 moment. Knights of the Old Republic, and after that era is when I started to move away from lack of time and excess of life responsibilities.
But hey, right now, a perfect chance with
right.
with WrestleQuest, right? You're back in it now.
That's right.
You're all the way back in it. How would you say, like ranking wise, like WrestleQuest maybe versus not Final Fantasy, but like that type of game? Are you people going to be as into it as they are when they were obsessed? My God, with Final Fantasy.
Sure, that's actually something we talked about with the core of the design of WrestleQuest is taking that classic turn-based JRPG combat and then WrestleFying it to make it more interesting and more engaging. We're very aware, since we grew up with these games, that classic turn-based system can get boring after a while, where you're just kind of spamming the attack button to get through fights. WrestleQuest, we have a ton of wrestling-based systems where you can't do that. For example, there's a hype meter, which is an indication of how entertained the crowd is. Every battle takes place in front of a live audience. So if you're just sitting there doing the same attack over and over again, they get bored. And when that happens, your enemies get stronger. But if you come in and you mix it up and listen to the crowd and try to give them what they want, just like in a real wrestling match, then that hype meter builds up and you get stronger, you get better loot after the battle, more experience points. And that's just the first layer. There's a ton of other things to make it so you have to pay attention, you have to be engaged. Another cool thing is that every move is animated. In a lot of RPGs from that era, or even modern RPGs, JRPGs, watching combat is kind of boring. There's not a lot going on. Where in WrestleQuest, with everything, all the moves, every suplex, pile driver, it's all animated. So it's fun to watch and fun to play. It's fun to stream too. So I think we've done a lot of work there to, again, evolve that classic formula into something that can appeal to, modern fans that are casual, or modern wrestling fans, or, give JRPG fans something new and fresh and fun.
Did you try any of those moves on James at all? You tried.
I've tried. Yeah, you can only be half successful though. So,
James, as far as the game, did we miss anything, like any sort of big put, anything new added? Did we miss anything as far as WrestleQuest?
It's such a big game. You figure like it's like over 40 hours just on the critical path for someone that knows where they're going and what they're doing. If you start exploring and going into side quests, it's pushing 70 plus hours. It's just a lot of game, so it's really like a story first experience. There's a rich cast of characters you can play as that all represent different styles and types and origins of wrestling, like tropes and stories you might have experienced in some way, or sometimes they're representative of, I guess, like wrestling subgroups. As an example, like your Omachi Machis, like your Japanese wrestling strong style inspired space. And for some wrestling fans, it might be the first time they get to learn about that. And for fans that are super fans, it's cool to see it all represented. That's kind of the WrestleQuest recipe, is just taking every possible Easter egg, meme, and wrestling memory we've canvassed for the last couple of years and finding ways to authentically connect it to story.
Zach, as far as where everybody can kind of find the game and what system it's on, just give us all the information as far as WrestleQuest.
Yeah, it's coming out on PC and then all major consoles, Switch, Xbox, PS4, 5. So you can get anywhere.
Now, as far as the date it's coming out, is it still going to be August 8th?
Yep.
And available everywhere August 8th, or available PC first August 8th and then everywhere else after that?
Everywhere. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, interesting that I saw Jeff Jarrett, James. I saw he was out there promoting for you guys, right? Where did I see Jeff promoting you guys?
Honestly, Jeff promotes us everywhere. Grocery store, bank, driving to work, hitting the gym. He's a true WrestleQuest believer. He's our wrestling executive producer, so he's not just licensed talent. He's there to help with the authenticity of the stories and representation, and it's been awesome working with Jeff. And Jeff literally does promote it everywhere. We actually just got a tweet yesterday, and it was someone who was saying they jumped off of Jeff's podcast to hurry up and download the demo because they were so excited listening to him talk about WrestleQuest. We just came back from San Diego Comic-Con last week, so Jeff was there signing autographs, doing heel stuff, everything you'd expect for a Jeff Jarrett.
He's great. About 8 years ago, when I first started the podcast, he was the first ever guest that I ever had.
Nice.
So that's some history.
It's
and
an
every time I
auspicious
talk
beginning.
to him, every time I talk to him, he always mentions, he's like, Buzz, I still remember that. And I think sometimes I think he's working me, and then he will remember it. I'm like, my God, he's awesome. I was like, I can't believe you remember that. He's like, it was your first guest. I was like, yes. So he really is the best. I mean, I know he's a heel, and we can't say that technically, but I think he's the best.
Dude, he's the best deal. I'm with you, man. People ask us like, who are your favorite 3 wrestlers? It's Jeff Jarrett 3 times.
Zach, are you in agreement? Do you love Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff's been amazing to work with. Super great, and like James mentioned, he's helped us to tell those stories, especially about the things that happen outside the ring. Like make sure then, as we're telling the lives of wrestlers, being on the road, being away from family and all that, he's lived through that. So he helps us to make sure those stories come off as authentic, make sure that they are authentic.
Nobody better than him. My
Right.
God, he's been
Yeah.
in every facet as a kid with his dad in it, and then so on.
He's also like the biggest wrestling fan still. Like he probably watches more wrestling than like any of us. He's just a huge student and of the business, but also has a great love for it as well.
It's amazing, like to be that good and reach the mountaintop at the top level, but still be a fan and watch it. It's pretty amazing with him.
He's sharp, man.
King of the mountain, dude.
Yeah,
exactly, king of the mountain, and he gives you guys a wealth of knowledge there as the the EVP wrestling wise, right? I mean, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, James, as far as WrestleQuest and all that, just give us one last just big push. I know it's the ultimate pro wrestling adventure, but just like a little tagline or a little catchphrase or something that you would attach to WrestleQuest in your own way.
Something I'd attach to WrestleQuest in my own way. Like, if you like wrestling and you want to get incredibly sweaty, this would be the best video game to bring that dream to life.
Nice. That's a good little catchphrase that you guys can use. I like that. It's pretty good. Now, Zach, as far as you, just give us one last push at just like where everybody can find it again, and also MegaCat and what MegaCat's been up to.
Sure. So WrestleQuest comes out August 8th for PC and all major consoles from MegaCat Studios, published by Skybound. MegaCat is the sweatiest video game development studio in the business. We make retro games and modern games with a retro ethos. And we're here to WrestleFi, not just RPGs, but all genres. So watch out for what comes next.
Don't you wish we were just making wrestle games?
Yes.
Like the rest of our cat lives, which 9 of them. So there's that.
There's a lot.
Honestly, we're just so blessed to have had the opportunity to make WrestleQuest. It's such a big game, John, and it's games are so tough. It's just like this. It's a hit-based industry. Like when you have a deep love and reverence for something like we do for wrestling and RPGs, it's just a massive bite to chew on. And it's just been so rewarding watching fans just go crazy for it and get so much hype. So every day I'm going to sleep just like wishing it was August 8th at this point.
Yes, for sure. August 8th, the Ultimate Pro Wrestling Adventure, Tag Team with Destiny, WrestleQuest. Go to WrestleQuest.com for more info and see all the legends, including Macho Man Randy Savage, Andre the Giant, Jake the Snake Roberts, and the Legion of Doom, a.k.a. the Road Warriors. James, Zach, thank you so much for all the time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.